body. So everything, every part of the pot is really suspended kind of from this rim. Just like all of the parts of my body that allow me to stand up and be functional are suspended from my spine. So that is a very, very important part of your pot. And each time that you are throwing a pot, and each time you have manipulated the pot, it's really important to go back and compress the rim to make it strong. And the other thing that that does is that it actually brings the rim back on center. So say that you had thrown your pot off somehow, like I just did by a careless move. If I go right to it right away and I compress the rim, see how it came back? So you can throw a pot off. You'll be delighted to hear this. You can throw a pot off at every stage of working with it. So that is your tool for making sure that you can fix it if it happens. Okay, so now we're ready for the big time. I got some water here on my sponge in my hand. And now I'm going to show you how to pull a pot up and make the walls taller. So I'm going to get some water, and there's a couple ways to get the water into the pot now that it has an inside and outside. You can run water down your finger that's on the inside and your finger that's on the outside by just putting your sponge here and letting it run. Or the way that my own teacher does it is that he squirts it on the inside and squirts it on the outside. So whatever works for you is fine. Now, notice that I'm working at 4 o'clock on the clock face. See, if this wheel was a clock face, this is 4 o'clock, right? That's where you always need to be, and in the technique of throwing that we're using. And your left hand is always the hand that's inside the pot. And while I'm thinking to say this right now, because I often forget and it's really important, have you noticed how I never touch my pot unless it's going around? So it's really important to try to remember not to touch your pot unless it's moving. Because if I were to just kind of, like be messing around on the floor of my pot or doing something on the side, I run a really great chance of throwing it completely out of that perfect round that we established when we centered it, right? So try to remember not to touch your clay unless it's going around. All right, so after all that, my left hand is inside the pot at 4 o'clock, and I get it right down into that right angle. And yet, because I have a floor that's like half an inch thick, it's not quite down to the wheel head, is it? But when I bring my my right hand in to work on pulling the pot, it's right down at the wheel head. So that creates an offset in my fingers. And so you will see, as I pull the pot up, you'll actually see a ridge. And that ridge comes from the difference in height of my two fingers. And it will probably even out as I get toward the top. So again, I have my elbows in. I have myself braced down. There are 3 ways to throw. One is with your fingertips to fingertips. Another way is with your sponge wrapped around your index finger and your fingertips on the inside. And the other final way is to use your knuckle of your right hand and your fingertips on the inside. And you should try all 3 of those ways. This knuckle thing is much better with great big pieces of clay. The tips of fingers to tips of fingers is really important when you have very fragile, thin pieces of clay. And I learned to throw with a sponge from early on, so that's how I do it. So you try different ways and see what you like. So I'm cleaning my floor, getting my rim compressed, getting some water inside and outside the pot, and now I'm coming to my pot, and see how my 2 hands are braced together. So you want to get as braced as you can at all times. All right, so here we go. I'm actually going to start exerting pressure with both hands pretty much equally. And the pot then, just like it did before when I squeezed it, it went up, but now it's the wall going up. And I go all the way from the bottom to the top. And when I get up to the top, see some clay came off with my sponge, not a problem. When I get to the top, and I get myself right in position and compress my rim. And I go in there and I get the water off of the floor of the pot, and this rim is still looking a little irregular, so I'm going to go back and compress it again. So it's really important, at least in my opinion, when you're throwing, that you really take a look and see that when I do this, I go all the way from the bottom of the pot all the way to the top of the pot. If I'm throwing all the way up the pot. Later you might learn techniques where you're only throwing part of the pot, but here we're throwing the whole pot, right? So what I want to caution you of is that a couple of things that are not throwing. One is when I see people doing this kind of thing. I'm going to get rid of that little lump of clay there. Okay? This is massaging the pot. It's not throwing. Okay? And the other thing that would work for some period of time, but it won't work very long, is throwing into your palm. So see how I have my palm, my whole hand on the outside of the pot, and my fingertips on the inside, and I'm throwing into my palm. That technique can only work for a pot about this tall, because that's how big the palm of my hand is. All right. The other problem with that is that because I have my whole hand on the pot, there's that much more surface area touching the pot, and therefore there's that much more friction. And friction will be one of the things that throws it off center. So that being said, I always want you to go all the way from the bottom to the top. The other thing that's going on here that is, it's kind of like a negative space, so you don't really see it, is my hands are very quiet. So if my hands need to be absolutely, and of course this won't be the case for you at first, you have to work to get there. They need to be completely without vibration or jiggling as I go from bottom to top. And if I do that, that means that the wall of the pot will be nice and even. And I can probably just cut right through this pot using my needle tool. And pull away the outer part. And you can see that the walls are pretty even. There's no points where they get thinner, and they get a little thicker at the top, which is normal because we've been compressing. So that is opening and pulling a pot. And that's far enough to go for today. And if you happen to get one that is open, you know, that you get one that's ready to come off of the wheel because it really is looking like a pot, then you can get some help, and we'll go over that next time. Okay? So, thank you.